Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever or wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show. I butchered that intro. I am your host, Michael Clifford. It is back. The NHL is back after the 3-day holiday break, vacation, whatever you want to call it. NHL back on the board here tonight. There are 13 games total, 12 on the main slate. There's an early game. I think it's Rangers Islanders. That's not on the slate, but we do have 12 games here tonight. Lots to get through. Good to see everybody back again. Always nice to recharge the batteries a little bit. Maybe watch a little World Juniors and then get right back into it. So we do have 12 games tonight. Also want to make a note. Players aren't allowed to travel unless obviously they're going to visit family or whatever. They're not allowed to travel during that 3-day break. So all the players that were scheduled to be on the road, like in a road game, they departed sometime this morning to get to where they're going. We already saw one instance. Boston was hours late getting to Buffalo because of the snowstorm in the Northeast, or the blizzard, whatever you want to call it. They didn't have a morning skate, so they're not going to have any skate until warm-up. There are probably going to be a few teams like that with difficulty traveling. So that's something to keep a note of. Obviously, it affects the Northeastern teams the most. So, whether you're looking at Detroit or Washington or things like that, Detroit not quite in the Northeast, but you know what I mean. Those are kind of the problem areas. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Obviously, we'll drop any updates we have in the Discord, but we may not get line combinations for certain teams, starting goalies for certain teams until warm-ups tonight. All right. Enough jibber jabbering. We've got 12 games to get through, so let's get through these games. The first one is that Boston-Buffalo game I talked about. Boston with a 3.0 total, Buffalo with a 3.4 total. Some pretty big news in that Rasmus Dahlin isn't going to be in the lineup for Buffalo. He is with his girlfriend, obviously, or fiance, sorry. Obviously, he took some time off earlier in the year. She was having some health issues. He's spending a couple extra days with her. He's going to be back next week, but he's going to miss this game. So he is out. Looks like Bowen Byram jumping to the top power play unit. We do talk about defensemen at the end, but Byram only 3,200 here. So something to keep in mind. Buffalo did have a morning skate. They're at home. Luckily, they're going with the same lineup they've been going with lately. Thompson, Doan, and Krebs. Top line, Josh Norris, Alex Tuck, Noah Usland. Second line, McLeod, Quinn, Benson. Third line. I'll say one thing. I've been kind of surprised that the Buffalo top line has not been horrific defensively, or offensively rather, with Peyton Krebs there. And considering their price, reasonably priced at $14,400 between the three of them, they have a pretty good, points per thousand projection here tonight. Thompson, Doan, Krebs, 30.3 combined fantasy points, 14,400 salary. 2.1 fantasy points per thousand. It's the second highest of any line price between 14 and 17K here tonight. Now, obviously, with a cheap price and solid projection, they are going to carry ownership, 6.6% top two stack, 14% ownership. It's a lot of negative leverage. The key here is that Thompson and Doan are both on the top power play unit. We mention it every show. Boston, the most penalized team in the NHL over the last 5 weeks, 3.8 times shorthanded per game. The most penalized team in the NHL over the course of the season, 3.8 times shorthanded per game. Obviously, we bring it up every time Josh Doan has been healthy and on the top power play unit. The top power play for Buffalo has actually been very good this year whenever Doan's been healthy and on that top unit. So I don't like playing a stack where the ownership is 2x the top two. I don't have as much of a problem with it when that line is 14,400, because then you can still fit in a fairly expensive line. We'll get to Ottawa, New Jersey, Tampa Bay, Florida, those kinds of things. You probably can't play them. It might be tight with Colorado or something like that, but you can still play them with a pretty good line. Thompson's been getting 19 plus minutes a game over his last 5 games. Doan's around 17. So, you're getting decent minutes for the important guys. I don't mind that top line, especially where they're going to be going out against Boston 1 a fair bit. Buffalo doesn't hard match, but they'll see some of that top Boston line. And the top Boston line has not been good defensively this year, regardless of the combination that they have. So, even if, just in general, David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie over the last 20 games, 3.4 expected goals against per 60 when they're on the ice. It's pretty poor defensively. So solid 5-on-5 matchup, really good power play match for that top line. There is a lot of ownership. I don't mind playing them. 2x the ownership, it's pretty high, but at 14,400, at least they're priced close to a filler. So I don't mind Buffalo 1. Buffalo 2, I'm probably out on. Norris, Tuck, and Uslan, they really haven't shown a ton offensively. If you want to take out Krebs and put Josh Norris into the top line, make it more of a power play stack, double center stack, I think you can do that. That's fine by me. I'm focusing on the Buffalo power play guys here just because their power play has been good. They've been drawing power plays, 3 power play opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks. It's better than league average. Not great, but better than league average. And we know how much Boston goes to the penalty box. And the penalty kill itself isn't very good. So really good spot for the Buffalo power play guys. Don't mind Buffalo 1 just because it is such a good power play spot. On the Boston side, funny thing, we don't know exactly what the lineup is going to be. They did go to Lindholm, Geekie, Pastrnak top line in that 6-2 loss to Montreal. If that is the top line, believe it or not, it is the highest projected line on the board here tonight. 37.5 points, 18,900. Obviously, there's a fair bit of ownership on them, but the top 2 stack at 17.8% also leads everyone here tonight. Now, it is the matchup against Buffalo, just because Edmonton has Calgary. I know Edmonton pounded Calgary right before the break, but Calgary typically a good defensive team. Colorado's facing Vegas on the road. It's not a great matchup for them. So Boston's top line actually has the highest top 2 stack here on the night. And without Rasmus Dahlin, whatever we want to say about Dahlin, he's probably their best defensive defenseman. As whatever, he's good offensively. He's a very important part of the offense, but he's also probably their best defensive defenseman. And if you take him out of the lineup, now all of a sudden, you're relying on Owen Power more. You're relying on Bowen Byram more. Those guys typically haven't been that great defensively. I really don't mind playing Boston 1 here. They're still coming in with positive leverage. At 18,900, you can still fit in a 13, 14K stack, like the Buffalo top line we just talked about. I wouldn't do both top lines in this game, but, just for an example. So, considering that they're not that expensive, they're perfectly correlated on the power play. Buffalo's penalty kill has been sliding since a really hot start to the season. It's all driven by goaltending. With no Rasmus Dahlin, it is a 3 total. It's a pretty high road total for Boston here. I think it's both top lines for me in this game. Just because I can save $4,000 and it's similar ownership, I would probably just go to Buffalo. But I think both top lines are very worthy of consideration. And for their respective price range, they're near or at the top of the board. So, again, just because they're at home with a 3.4 total, and Boston takes so many penalties, I prefer the Buffalo side. But if I'm 20 maxing or something, I might sneak in a couple Boston there. I get there's some trepidation, just because of Boston not having a morning skate. The first time they hit the ice is going to be warm up after a 3-day break and lots of food and booze over the holidays. Who knows what kind of game shape they're going to be in, but considering how high that projection is and how good their fantasy points per 1,000 is, I really don't mind Boston 1, but it is Buffalo 1 I prefer here. All right, let's move it along. To our next game, Carolina 3.4 total. They're hosting Detroit. Detroit has a 2.6 total. Should also mention Detroit's on a back-to-back here. They haven't confirmed their goalie. Brandon Bussi likely starting here for Carolina. Don't know who's going to go for Detroit, and they are on the back-to-back, so it could be either goalie. Regardless of the goalie, it wouldn't change a whole lot for me. We'll start on the Detroit side. Like, I don't hate the Detroit top line here. You know, they're not that expensive, right? 17,700. What I really like is 1.1% projected ownership. So 5.1% top two stack, 1.1% projected ownership. Listen, we've been talking about it. Carolina is getting their defensemen a lot more active off the rush this year. I think it's leading to some more high danger shots against. Brandon Bussi's been very, very good for Carolina. So that is, or at least, good enough where Carolina's ability to limit shots keeps the goals against down. But nobody playing that Detroit top line against a Carolina team that is going to be missing some bodies. Obviously, still no Seth Jarvis, still no Jacob Slavin. Keandre Miller is a game time decision, like especially if Miller's out. I will say personally, I'm not playing Detroit 1 here on the road against Brandon Bussi on a 12-game slate. I also play single entry. If I was 20 maxing, they would at least be in consideration to play just because nobody's playing them. And we know how good Detroit 1 has been at times this season. I mean, Lucas Raymond, 14 points in his last 12 games. Now, 11 of those 14 points are assists, but he's been hot. I think Dylan Larkin has 5 goals in those 12 games or something like that. So I don't mind Detroit 1 here. They're not my favorite in that price range, but if I'm 20 maxing or anything above that, I certainly am considering them here, especially if there's no Keandre Miller, and then all of a sudden Carolina's down their best winger and their top 2 defensemen for a team that's already giving up a fair amount of high danger chances, especially relative to the number of shots that they give up. So don't mind Detroit 1 here, but again, I think for me, that's 20 max and above. That's not necessarily single entry. The question is what to do with Carolina. The reason is because the top line looks to be Aho, Svechnikov, and Stankoven, 16,800. Points per thousand is perfectly fine at 1.75. They've changed up the power plays a little bit with their injuries. Aho and Svechnikov are going to be on the top power play unit. Stankoven on the second unit, though. Here's my problem is that Carolina's offensive numbers when Sebastian Aho has been on the ice without Seth Jarvis this year have not been very good. 2.5 expected goals for, 2.3 actual goals for at 5-on-5. That is like below average offensively, and I think it speaks to just how good and how important Seth Jarvis is to this team, especially at even strength. So if this was a situation where Carolina's power play had been humming along all season and was like a top 6 or top 8 power play in the league, I'd say, yeah, maybe there's some consideration here. But with how bad they've been offensively with Seth Jarvis off the top line and the power play not really doing anything at any point this season, I think I'm out on Carolina 1. Carolina 2 is a little interesting. Ehlers, Blake, and Kotkaniemi, even 12K. One of the highest point per dollar values of all the fillers. In fact, the highest that I have here tonight using stochastic projections. They're probably going to be fair, with carrying a fair amount of ownership, but at 12K, I think it's fine because they're going to have to play minutes here, right? With the injuries, they don't like relying heavily on the fourth line. They are probably getting both Carrier and Martinook back tonight. So that might mute the ice time a little bit, but with no Jarvis, there's a lot of ice time to make up for. So I don't mind Carolina 2. They're probably my favorite line in this game just because they're so cheap. You do get Ehlers and Blake on the top power play unit. They'll do that thing probably where Stahl starts and then Blake jumps on or Ehlers jumps on or one of them. I don't mind that second line just because at 12K, I think they're fine as a filler. You don't need a lot from them. Carolina at the very least is drawing a lot of power play opportunities, so maybe they can go like 1 for 4 or something like that. I don't mind Carolina too. Honestly, not my favorite game on the board here tonight, but I would prefer to play anything from Carolina than the Detroit side here. Also Nightbot special news there. Limited time deal, as it says, you get 20% off any DFS package. Use a promo code GIFT. If you are signing up for DFS, if you use the promo code PuckLuck, that's the reference code for this show. It would be a big help to us. So if you are signing up for the DFS package, just use the promo code PuckLuck, and we can still get you 20% off on top of that. Just message myself or Jake Harry or someone through Twitter. All right, let's keep this rolling because we got 10 more games to get through. Tampa Bay, they've got a 3 total. They're going into Florida. Florida's also got a 3 total. No Ryan McDonough for Tampa Bay tonight. No Brandon Hagel for Tampa Bay tonight. Mackie Samoskevich looks like he's back for Florida in on the third line. Florida did change up their lines a bit in that last game before the break, but they're going back to what they had, which means Verhaeghe with Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand, then Anton Lundell, Eetu Luostarinen, and Sam Reinhart on, quote, the second line. Marchand and Bennett have been really, really good offensively together this year, like outstanding offensively together this year. They're up to 190 minutes, 71 shot attempts, 4 expected goals per 60. Sam Bennett's been playing about 20 plus a game over his last 5 games. Brad Marchand's been around 19 plus. Even Verhaeghe's been around 17 minutes. Sam Bennett has quietly been on a tear for a while now. His last 16 games, which is 20% of the season, he has 19 points and he's averaging 3.3 shots per game in that span. Brad Marchand obviously has been very productive as well. That line is expensive at $18,200, but they're not coming in with that much ownership. 7 points. There's that line. Marchand, Verhaeghe, Bennett, 32.25 projected points combined, 18,200 salary, 7% top 2 stack, 3.7% ownership. I was looking at the Tampa Bay numbers. Now, Tampa Bay is starting the game with Gage Gonsalves on the top line. We've seen like the last 3 or 4 games, maybe even longer, Yanni Gourde jump up to the top line during the game. So I think that changes. But Brain Point, Gage Gonsalves together this year, 65 shot attempts against, 3 expected goals against per 60. They've been pretty bad defensively. So that's the matchup that Marchand and Bennett get. It's probably a good one for them, especially with no Ryan McDonough in the lineup. Tampa Bay's second line, and if you look at Anthony Cirelli and Jake Gensel, when they don't have one of Kucherov or Hagel on the other wing, 63 shot attempts against, 3.2 expected goals against. Both those lines are probably not going to be very good defensively. I think this is a pretty good matchup for Florida. At 18,200, they're not far off that Boston line that we talked about. Boston has a much higher projection, but they're only $200 more expensive than the Tampa Bay Kucherov Point Gonsalves line. And that line is at 1.2% ownership. This line at 3.7%. That's not a huge difference for me. Not big enough of one to get away from. I think this is a much better matchup for Florida than it is for Tampa Bay. Brandon Hagel and Ryan McDonough even is one of the more underrated defensemen, able to at least move the puck and get the puck going in the right direction. Tampa still has some good puck movers at the top of the lineup for their defensemen, but once you get to those second and third pairs, you get to your Declan Carlisle, Steven Santini's, and so forth. Like, there's just a lot missing. I really do like Marchand, Verhaeghe, and Bennett here. It is tough to leave off Reinhart of the stack. So if you want to make it more expensive stack, take off Verhaeghe. put in Reinhart. I think you can do that, but I'm perfectly fine just playing that Florida second line as it is. So Bennett, Verhaeghe, Marchand for me from the Florida side. From the Tampa side, like, I really don't have a lot of interest here. Braden Point, like, he has been better of late, hasn't really still, broken out in a big way offensively yet this year. Like, if you look at just his game since returning from injuries, yeah, it's nice. He's got 8 points in 8 games, averaging 2.6 shots per game. But, a 30 goal, 80-point pace or whatever is not the Braden Point that we're typically used to seeing, who is like a 40 to 45 goal, over a point per game pace. So, especially with the top line's probably going to get broken up at some point. The second line, again, without Hagel or Kucherov there, has just not been the same offensively. I think I'm just kind of out on Tampa here. Again, where they're basically the same price as Florida. The ownership isn't that far off. And that Florida second line has a much better point per dollar projection. I'm in on Florida too. Nothing for me really from the Tampa Bay side. All right. Washington, 2.7 total. They're going into New Jersey. New Jersey Devils have a 2.9 total. Devils running back the same lineup as last game. So it means Hischier, Meyer, and Mercer, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Andre Palat. Still haven't seen much news or really any news about Washington. I'm assuming they're one of the teams that's having some trouble with some travel here. Both the top two lines have been pretty good offensively at 5-on-5 this year. Hischier, Meyer, Mercer, 3.1 expected goals per 60 in 150 minutes. The Hughes line, 3.4 expected goals per 60 in 105 minutes. I would really like to see what the Washington lineup looks like, whether Tom Wilson is back. Remember, he missed the last game before the break. So, I'm not expecting Wilson to play here tonight, but again, we won't know until warmups. The Hughes Bratt Palat line does not have a very good point per dollar projection, and a lot of it is just because Andre Palat just does not project well. He doesn't shoot a ton. It's not huge, productive in any real way. I think what I would do with New Jersey here is turn it into some sort of power play stack. Like, if you want to take off Palat, put in Hischier, make it a double center stack. I think you can do that. If you want to keep it to roughly the same price, Stefan Nason, 3K, is only $100 more than Palat. He's on the top power play unit. Again, Washington's penalty kill over the last 5 weeks has improved to middle of the league, but they still have bottom 10 metrics. The only reason they've really improved is because their goaltending on the penalty kill has been really good. Otherwise, this is a pretty good power play spot for New Jersey. The Devils, they don't draw like a pile of power plays. They're sixth lowest rate in the league over the last 5 weeks, but the Caps do take a fair share of penalties. So, I really don't mind going to some sort of New Jersey stack. And like I said, if you want to keep it to roughly the same price, then you just go, then you just replace Andre Palat on that second line with Hughes and Bratt. You just replace him with Stefan Nason. Or if you want to make it more expensive, Nico Hischier does play a ton of minutes. He gets involved offensively at all strengths. Do a double center stack. Go with Hischier, Hughes, and Bratt. I think you can do that as well. There are multiple ways that you can use the Hughes-Bratt duo, whether it's with Nason, whether it's with Hischier. I just think it's a really good power play matchup. And if you look at New Jersey's power play, they create like 15% more shots and about 20% more goals when Jack Hughes is healthy and in the lineup. So him being back is obviously a big boost to the power play. I really don't mind that second line, whether they get first or second line matchups against Washington. It's not that big of a deal for me. I do like that New Jersey second line. All things being equal, I would still rather go play Florida. So for me, it's Hughes, Bratt, and then either one of Nason or Hischier. That's where I am on the New Jersey side. But again, in that price range, I'd probably rather just go play Florida. And if you are making the swap where, you go pay an extra 3,600 for Nico Hischier, I think at that point you maybe just want to go Edmonton or Colorado. But I don't think it's a bad spot for New Jersey. I do like that second line. It's a pretty good power play spot for them. So that's where I am on the Devils. On the Washington side, like, it's hard to know what to say. We just do not know what that lineup is going to look like. Hopefully Tom Wilson is back, but if he's not, like, I was looking at Washington's top line production at 5-on-5 with no Dylan Strome or Pierre-Luc Dubois, 58 shot attempts, 2.5 expected goals per 60. It's basically league average. That's the Ovechkin line. So not a whole lot there. If you want to dip down to that Washington second line, assuming it's Strome, Leonard, Protas, I think you can do that. You get 2 out of the 3 on the top power play unit. Maybe you want to replace Protas with Ovechkin, make it more of a power play stack. New Jersey's penalty kill is not very good. The Devils don't take many penalties. 6th lowest rate in the league over the last 5 weeks, 5th lowest rate in the league over the course of the season. So Washington might only get a couple power plays here tonight. I think all else equal, I do like Washington to the most on that side. They're not coming in with a lot of ownership here. 2.6% top 2 stack, 2.5% ownership, 1.8 fantasy points per $1,000. I think that's perfectly fine for that second line. At 14,200, they're kind of like a low owned pivot away from Buffalo, if you want to look at it that way. But I prefer the New Jersey side here. So for me, it's New Jersey too. But I would probably take out Palat and put in one of Nason or Hischier, just depending on what I want to do with my secondary stat. All right, let's move things along. Battle of Ontario, Ottawa, 3.1 total. They're going into Toronto Maple Leafs have a 2.9 total. It's funny, we were actually talking about the Leafs in the Discord before the show and what the problems are with Toronto and all that. And like I was saying in the Discord, I still say the big problem, obviously, you'd like to see Austin Matthews at 100% health. He still has nagging injuries, whatever you want to call it. The blue line can't move the puck. The Toronto defensemen are just really, really bad puck movers. It is night and day what the offense does when Morgan Riley's on the ice compared to when he's not. It is what it is. I was looking at the Toronto top line's numbers with Max Domi. They're like 53 shot attempts, 2.6 expected goals per 60. That is an Austin Matthews line creating 53 shot attempts per 60 minutes in a 140-minute sample. That's what he's done with Max Domi on the wing. Matthews is the only guy on his line on the top power play unit. Like, for me, it's just kind of an easy pass. Like, it's funny that, that Toronto top line, I have them classified as a filler because I classify any line under 14K as a filler. This is an Austin Matthews line priced as a filler stack. 13,800, and they don't even have a good point per dollar value at 1.77. It's one of the 4 worst marks amongst the 14 filler stacks I have listed here. I just, oh my God. It's one of those situations where as long as Ottawa's goaltending, and it is Linus Ullmark starting, as long as Ullmark is anything approaching league average here, Ottawa is so good defensively. Both of the Ottawa top 2 lines have an expected goals against rate under 2.0 at 5.05. They're so good defensively that I just don't think it's necessarily a good spot for Toronto. What I will say is the Toronto second line, Nylander, Tavares, Michelli, 15,600, 0.3% ownership. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. And if you look at their minutes with Michelli on the second line, 65 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals per 60. It's playable. They're at home at least. They're going to get a lot of the middle 6 matchups. That's probably not even a good thing because that means running into the Giroux line and the Cousins lines, which has been pretty good defensively. But, you will avoid Stützle and Tkachuk a fair bit. If anything, on the Toronto side, it's Toronto too, but I'm not super jazzed about playing the Leafs here. Especially where the Leafs don't draw power plays, Sens don't take a ton of penalties. It's not like Toronto's ever in a good power play matchup anyway. But I just the prices are reasonable. That's why I have some interest in Toronto. It's because they do have reasonable prices. So for that reason, I guess I think Toronto too is playable, but I'm not super excited about playing the Leafs. The Ottawa side is much more interesting to me. Now, that Ottawa second line really doesn't have a good projection here. 14,000 for 22.6 fantasy points, 1.6 fantasy points per thousand, 0.4% ownership, 1.4% top two stack. They're playable. For me, it's Ottawa's top line. Kachuk, Stutzler, Zetterlund, 19,600. 19,600, 1.56 fantasy points per thousand. It's not great, but very good leverage. 6.9% top two stack, 2.3% ownership. They are getting fairly expensive, but they're in good matchups across the board here tonight. Toronto's still using Matthews in a shutdown matchup, and when he's there with Domi, 63 shot attempts, 3.2 expected goals against per 60. That is just awful defensive numbers. The Leafs don't take a ton of penalties. That's kind of their one saving grace. But Ottawa has been drawing more power plays, 3.5 power play opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks. It is tied for the second highest rate in the league over the course of the season. Ottawa's still been able to draw power plays at a very reasonable rate. Just outside the top five, tied for the top five. Sorry. I was looking for the right sheet there. Tied for the top 5 power play opportunities per game. We know how good Ottawa's power play has been. Toronto's penalty kill has been a lot better lately. That's because of a 946 save percentage on the penalty kill. That's something that just absolutely cannot sustain itself. Their penalty killing metrics still in the bottom 8 of the league. So they won't have a very good penalty kill, even with a league average penalty kill save percentage. They would absolutely have a bottom 10 penalty kill in the league. So I do like Ottawa 1. That 19,600 is kind of the upper limit for price. But Fabian Zetterlund, it's not like he hasn't done anything, right? Like his last 16 games, again, that's 20% of the season. He has 12 points. He's averaging 2.4 shots per game. Like he's still contributing fairly well. It's a great 5-on-5 matchup. It's a pretty good power play matchup, even if they don't get a ton of opportunities. I do like that Ottawa top line here. If you want to make it more of a power play stack, take out Zetterlund and go to Batherson, pay an extra $2K, go to Cousins, pay an extra $1,500. I think that's doable. But considering how productive Zetterlund has been, over the last several weeks, and the fact that it's a very good 5-on-5 matchup, I'm perfectly fine just playing Ottawa 1. So for me, it's Ottawa 1 and Toronto 2 in this game. I much prefer the Ottawa side to the Toronto side. All right, let's get to our next one. Minnesota, 2.8 total going under Winnipeg. Winnipeg also has a 2.8 total. The Jets are reuniting the top line, which means Gabriel Velarde going back to the top line alongside Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele. That line has obviously been very good offensively this season. 3.2 expected goals, 4.3 actual goals per 60 at 5-on-5. Great offensive numbers. The thing is like the Minnesota top two lines as currently constructed, pretty good defensive numbers. Hartman, Zuccarello, and Kaprizov, 2.1 expected goals against. The second line of Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Marcus Johansson over their last 10 games, 2.3 expected goals against. So no matter the matchup there for Winnipeg's top line, it's not a great one. And obviously with them moving Gustav Nyquist to the top power play, they're looking for answers for the top power play because things have definitely cooled off. They tried Cole Perfetti there. Alex Iafallo spent some time there. Now it's Gus Nyquist. Like at 20,200, like I think they're fairly playable, especially where they are going to be perfectly correlated. Their top two stack is higher than their ownership, 5.8% top two stack, 4.8% ownership. At 20,200, like I'd be pretty tempted to just go play Edmonton instead for an extra $600. You know what I mean? yeah, the ownership isn't that much higher. Like Edmonton's projected ownership is 7.6% against 4.8% for Winnipeg. And Edmonton's top two stack is almost 3 times higher. So like, I mean, if I'm 20 maxing or something like that, like then maybe I start considering the Jets. With a price over 20K and the fact that Edmonton's only $600 more expensive, Colorado's only $1,200 more expensive. You know, Ottawa's cheaper, Florida's cheaper, New Jersey's cheaper, especially if you just stick in Nason instead of Palat. Like, I just think that there are other spots you can go. So I'm just kind of out on the Jets here. On the Minnesota side, like, you know, Winnipeg doesn't take a ton of penalties, 2.7 per game over the last 5 weeks. You know, it's fringe bottom 10 or top 10, depending how you want to look at it. In the league, you know, with Connor Hellebuck healthy and starting, like it's, you know, definitely not a great matchup in net for Minnesota. I don't know. Like, there's not much ownership coming in on the Wild, which I think is what makes them playable. But, you know, both those lines, the top line with Kaprizov is 16,700. The second line is 16,800. There are a pile of lines between like 15 and 18K that are playable here tonight. You know, the New Jersey top line is just a little bit more expensive. We get to lines like Anaheim. We just talked about Toronto. We'll get to San Jose in a bit. Edmonton second line. Like, there are just other lines that I'd want to play here. Even Carolina, I think I'd rather play than either of those Minnesota lines. So, like, I don't know. On the Minnesota side, you're on the road against Hellebuck, and I think there are other lines that are playable in that price range. On the Winnipeg side, it's not a terrible matchup for them, especially with Velarde back on the top line. But if I'm paying over 20K for a line, I think it's easy just to go play Edmonton or Florida or New Jersey or Colorado instead. So, like, I think this game I'm just kind of out on in general. You know, it is a 5.5 total on a slate filled with 6, even some 6.5. So just kind of out on Minnesota, Winnipeg. So let's move it along. Get to a game that is a little bit more intriguing. Chicago Blackhawks, 2.1 total going into Dallas. Dallas with a 3.5 total. So Chicago, when Burakovsky's on the ice this year without Connor Bedard or Frank Nazar, Chicago's generating 52 shot attempts, 2.3 expected goals per 60. That line is going to see a lot of the Dallas top pair, which has been great defensively this year. You know, no Bedard, no Nazar on the road facing Haskin and Lindell. I think that's just a whole bunch of red flags for me. So I'm out on Chicago. Question is what to do on the Dallas side, because, you know, whatever else is wrong with Chicago with the injuries that they have, their penalty kill is still pretty good. By shot attempts against over the last 5 weeks, they're just outside the top 10 of the league. Over the course of the season, they're inside the top 5 by shot attempts against. Over the course of the season, they're third by goals against per 60 on the penalty kill. Over the last 5 weeks, they're 7th by goals against per 60 on the penalty kill. So whatever else is wrong with Chicago, they do have a pretty good penalty kill. Call it top 5 in the league. Split the difference between the full season and the last 5 weeks. It is the one thing that could, you know, kind of dampen Dallas here tonight, because Dallas is very power play reliant. You know, Dallas's top line of, you know, we'll call it the top line of Robertson, Hintz, and Bork has the higher projection between their two lines here. Also coming in with a lot more ownership. So I'll just bring up the Dallas lines here. The top line of Robertson, Hintz, and Bork, 31.9 fantasy points, 1.85 fantasy points per 1,000. But a 9% top 2 stack against 11.3% ownership share. The Johnston, Rantanen, Steele line, their projection is 4.5 points lower for virtually the same price. So their fantasy points per 1,000 is much worse, but they also have much lower ownership and much lower top 2 stack. So where this actually isn't a good power play matchup for Dallas, I don't think this is a situation where if you're playing Robertson and Hintz, you leave off Bork and add in Rantanen or Johnston. Or if you're playing Rantanen and Johnson, Steele, you take off Steele and put in one of Hintz or Robertson. I don't think this is a situation where you necessarily have to do that. I think just because this is a much better 5-on-5 matchup than it is a power play matchup for the Stars, I would go with the line that's actually created pretty well offensively this season. Robertson and Bork have played 140 minutes together this season at 5-on-5. 70 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60. Those are great offensive numbers at 5-on-5. Now, Robertson has slowed down of late. His last 15 games, he only has 14 points, averaging just over 3 shots per game. This is a guy, the first 20 games of the season, it's well over a point per game, over 4 shots per game. So obviously he's been slowing down. But, him and Hintz still skating, 17 to 19 minutes, depending on the game. Matchups at 5-on-5 are great. Really doesn't matter what line they see against Chicago. And they've been really, really good offensively. Just because they do have such a higher top 2 stack, I think that's kind of where I'd rather go. Like, the one thing that made Rantanen and Johnston especially appealing, for the first 8 weeks of the season, was their ice time, but they're not getting that much ice time of late. Like, Rantanen and Johnston are skating about 18 minutes a game over the last 5 games. It's not really a ton of ice time. Like, even Rantanen only has 14 shots in his last 10 games. Now, he's racked up a pile of assists, so he's still been fairly productive. But once the team stops shooting 25% when he's on the ice, with that kind of ice time, now that Duchesne and Ben are on the third line, they have a playable third line now. Now that they're not getting as much ice time, I'm not so high on Rantanen and Johnston. For me, it's the guys that have been creating very well at 5-on-5. And that's Robertson, Hintz, and Bork. So they're my favorite line in this game. Both lines are playable, especially where Dallas' second line is coming in with a lot less ownership. But I'll take the line that's coming in 3 times the top 2 stack at virtually the same price. So for me, it is Robertson, Hintz, and Bork I would be playing out of this game. And nothing off the Chicago side, obviously. Next one, Nashville and St. Louis. Both teams have a 2.8 total. Obviously, a lot of changes here. Jake Neighbors is going to the top line with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. That's because Jordan Kyrou is back. He's on the second line with Jonathan Berggren and Braden Shen. Jimmy Snuggerud is back. He's in on the third line. The top line of Neighbors, Thomas, and Buchnevich this season has actually been solid. Like 62 shot attempts, 3.7 expected goals for per 60. They had a pretty good season a couple of years ago when they were playing together. They're not perfectly correlated on the power play anymore. Neighbors is sliding down to the second unit, but you do get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play. Not that it's a good power play matchup for them. But Nashville, even with Nashville having a great penalty kill, they're taking a ton of penalties, 3.5 per game over the last 5 weeks. So even though Nashville's penalty kill has been top 10 by percentage in the league over the last 5 weeks, they're also worse than league average by power play goals against per game, just because they take so many penalties. So it's not like we ever stack St. Louis for the power play, but if they do get 3, 4, 5 opportunities here tonight, they stand a reasonable chance of like cracking at least one. So 15,200 for that top line. I don't mind them. Again, there are a lot of lines in that price range that you might want to play. We went over that Toronto second line at 15,600. I would probably rather play them. We'll get to Anaheim in a little bit. I do think they have a playable line. Like, we went over the Buffalo top line that is coming in with a lot more ownership, but has a way higher projection, almost 6 more fantasy points, which is 25% higher at a cheaper price. So I do think there are other playable lines in that price range, but I don't mind St. Louis one. It's the only line I would play from the St. Louis side. Not in a rush to play Jordan Kyrou coming back, especially with Jonathan Berggren on that line. So it's St. Louis one for me. On the Nashville side, the Nashville top line was Stamkos, 63 shot attempts, 3.8 expected goals for. per 60 minutes. As good as the St. Louis top line has been offensively at 5-on-5 with neighbors there, defensively, they've been worse than league average. St. Louis doesn't take a ton of penalties. Nashville power play's been about league average with Luke Evangelista on the top unit. So it's not like a great power play spot, but that Nashville top line is perfectly correlated. 16,600, 7.2% top two stacks, 7.4% ownership. Like, it's a good 5-on-5 matchup. It's a decent power play matchup. I don't mind Nashville 1 here. I would rather play Nashville 1 than St. Louis 1. And one thing I will say, I should have made a graphic, but I did see this. I think it was on the NHL Network. Maybe it was TSN, but over the second half of the season, so like Nashville's last 17 or 18 games or whatever, they've gone from one of the worst teams off the rush in the league to a fringe top 10 team. And that was something that made them really good under Andrew Brunette offensively a couple of years ago, was that they played fast off the rush. They weren't doing that at all early this season. Obviously, they weren't scoring at all. Been scoring a lot more lately, and I do think it's because they've been playing more off the rush. It can lead to some goals against. That's kind of the give and take nature of that type of style. But the fact that they've been generating so well with Steven Stamkos offensively, I think gives a little bit of credence to it. So I prefer Nashville 1 over St. Louis 1, but it's the two top lines in this game that I would want to play. Not interested so much in the depth. One-off guys like Kyrou or Evangelista or something like that, I think that's okay. But if I'm full stacking anything, it's the top lines. But I would play Nashville 1 over St. Louis 1. All right, getting to our final 4 games here. Speaking of Utah, flipping to the wrong page here. This is what happens when you have a notebook and everything looks the same. Not Utah, Anaheim. Utah's not on the board here tonight, thank God. Anaheim 2.8 total going into Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a 3.2 total. Big news from Anaheim skate. Leo Carlsson is back. He missed the last game before the break. He is back. They said he's going to be on the top line. That means with Chris Kreider and Troy Terry. That line is 17,500. Very good offensively this season. 72 shot attempts, 3.6 expected goals. They are also perfectly correlated on the top power play unit. Here's the problem. They're going to be going up against the Los Angeles shutdown pair of Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty. Now, whatever we might think of Drew Doughty in the year 2025, at home so far this season, the top pair of Anderson and Doughty, 2 expected goals against per 60, 48 shot attempts against per 60 minutes. The goals against sit at 2.3, which is kind of bad. But, that's kind of small sample noise, if you want to call it that. With Mikey Anderson on the ice, just overall, this team is so good defensively. It's just an absolute nightmare. Now, the one way that the Ducks top line might really break through here tonight, anything can happen. We've seen the Jordan Staal line, 2-3 years ago when they were, the best shutdown line in the league, get rolled over a couple times a season. The Michael Backlund line in Calgary a couple times a season will get rolled over at home. It happens. Most of the time they don't. The one way that the Anaheim top line can really break through here tonight is on the power play, because the Kings, 3.5 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the second highest rate in the league over the course of this. It's tied for the second highest rate in the league over the course of the season. Second highest rate in the league on the penalty kill. Over the course of the full season, Los Angeles penalty kill by goals against per minute below league average. Over the last 5 weeks, bottom 8 in the league. This is a really, really good power play matchup for Anaheim. That top line of Kreider, Terry, and Carlson perfectly correlated on the power play. The problem is like at 17,500, it is such a bad power play matchup for them, or 5-on-5 matchup for them, that you need at least 1 power play goal, if not 2. Maybe they get 2 and then an empty netter. maybe they get one goal at 5-on-5. It's just not one of those games where I expect them to pile up like 3 goals at 5-on-5 or something. It's just such a bad matchup for them, even with Anton Forsberg starting for the Kings. So I don't mind Anaheim 1. I think for me, that's something where I'd lean more at 20 max and above, just in case they do go like 2 for 4, 2 for 5 on the power play, or 3 for 5 or something like that. Those games do happen. The Anaheim top power play unit's been well above league average. So like they're good. They're not elite, but they're good. That's how I think the Anaheim top line can break through. So Anaheim 1 is very playable here. Just because they are perfectly correlated on the power play. I'm kind of interested in Anaheim 2. They'll avoid that Anderson Doughty pairing for the most part. 15,800 for Cutter Gauthier, Beckett Seneca, Mason McTavish. Over their last 10 games, 81 shot attempts, 4.3 expected goals per 60. McTavish averaging 2.6 shots per game over his last 15 games. We know how good Cutter Gauthier can be, and he's on the top power play unit. Anyway, 15,800, I honestly don't mind them. I would probably rather play them at $1,700 cheaper than the top line, while also avoiding the Doughty Anderson pair. So for me, it's Anaheim 2 that I prefer on the Ducks side. On the Kings side, now, again, we'll have to see what exactly comes from morning skate. The expectation is that it'll be Kopitar, Kempe, Moore, Byfield, Fiala, Laferriere. Now, that's just the projected lineup from the website Mayor's Manor. If there are any key changes during pregame warmups, this article will be updated. So that's something to keep note of. The Kings have been changing up their lines quite a bit lately. We'll have to see what it looks like. If they do just decide to run back what they have, which is Kempe, Kopitar, Laferriere, I don't mind that line. 15,700, 1.8 fantasy points per 1,000. That's a solid mark. 4.7 top 2 stack, 6.2% ownership. They'll get the depth lines from the Ducks. So it's not like the Ducks top line is great defensively, but those second and third lines from Anaheim are just not good. And then once you get into those depth defense pairings, especially getting to, Ian Moore and Drew Hellison and those guys, is just such a good matchup for Kempe and Kopitar. So I don't mind them, but this is a late game. And like I said, the projection is that Trevor Moore might jump back up to the top line. We'll see what things look like in warm-up. Moore and Laferriere have an $800 difference. So if you plug in Laferriere and it is Moore, you can just swap down, or you can just leave enough salary just to swap off from Moore to go up to Laferriere if you have to. But for me, it'd be Kopitar and Kempe. But this Kings team's just so anemic offensively. With Lucas Dostal back for the Ducks, it's not like you're facing Husso or Mrazek or something like that. I guess it's Kempe, Kopitar, X. Whether it's Trevor Moore or Laferriere, that's my interest on the Kings side. I don't have a lot of interest in the Kings. I honestly think I have more interest in the Ducks, and it's that Ducks second line for me. Moving along. Next game, Edmonton, 3.5 total. Calgary, 3.1 total. Edmonton, I won't say pounded Calgary, but they beat them 5-1 right before the break. Here's the funny thing is, I wrote down that Calgary's penalty kill has been in the top 10 of the league over the last 5 weeks, which they have been by goals against per 60 minutes. And the Edmonton power play shredded them 3 for 6 in that 5-1 win. That's just what this Edmonton power play is doing. It is absolutely torching everybody that comes close to them. That's a problem, because one thing Edmonton is doing lately is drawing more power play opportunities. Over the last 5 weeks, Edmonton's getting 3.1 power play opportunities per game. It's the 9th highest rate in the league, so not even amongst the top of the teams. but they're the only team in that stretch averaging over a power play goal per game. They're at 1.2 power play goals per game over their last 17 games. It is absolutely nutty. Like over the course of the season, Edmonton's averaging 0.95 power play goals per game. It is just behind, like a hair behind Dallas in power play goals per game, and the Oilers are 26th in power play opportunities per game. That's just like their power plays at 34% for the season. It's absolutely insane. And Calgary's been taking penalties, 3.1 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's worse than league average. The league average in that span, I think, is about 2.9. If you look at the course of the full season, the Flames are at 3.2 times shorthanded per game, times for the 9th most in the league. So Edmonton might get 4 or 5 power play opportunities again here tonight. And if they do that, I got to think they score at least one, right? The Edmonton top line of McDavid, Hyman, Nugent, Hopkins, 20,800, 15.6% top two stack, 7.6% ownership. So a lot of positive leverage here. The problem, of course, is like if you're expecting the Edmonton power play to find a lot of success here tonight, how do you make a build without Leon Draisaitl? That's just kind of my issue with the Oilers here. Leon Draisaitl, 27 of his 55 points this year have come on the power play. So half his production has come on the power play this year. Like, how do you leave that off in Edmonton stack with the power play going the way it is? So, like, I think what I would actually do with the Oilers is start with McDavid and Draisaitl and just go from there. Like, the next guy I would add in is probably Zach Hyman. Hyman, over his last 10 games, he has over 3 shots per game and 8 goals in that span, 14 points. Again, producing very well in the power play. Now, it obviously gets very, very expensive very, very quickly once you have McDavid, Draisaitl, plus almost anyone else. That's just kind of the way it is. Like, it's a bad 5-on-5 matchup for that top line facing the Backlund Coleman line, but they can shred just about anybody. I prefer Edmonton here over Winnipeg. I prefer them over Tampa Bay, even though Tampa Bay is a fair bit cheaper. But if you want to take off, Gonçalves and put on Gensel or something like that, it'd be a similar price. I would probably play Edmonton over Colorado here tonight. I do like the Edmonton top line, but again, it's one of those things like with the Edmonton power play finally drawing a lot of power play opportunities and Draisaitl so productive with the man advantage. How do you leave him off an Edmonton stack? So if I were to play the Oilers here, if I were to even strength stack a line, it would probably be Edmonton 2, Roslovic, Pog, Coles, and Draisaitl. Just because you get Draisaitl on the power play, they're going to avoid the Backlund Coleman matchup, so you'll get much better 5-on-5 matchups for that Draisaitl line at even strength. But with Edmonton drawing all the power play opportunities, it is, like I said, any Edmonton stack I make probably starts with McDavid and Draisaitl, and then I just kind of go from there. So really do like the Edmonton side here. Obviously, they have a 3.5 total is the highest road total on the board here tonight. It's just one of the highest totals overall. Like Dallas has a 3.5 here tonight, which I think is tied for the most. So really do like the Oilers, not coming with a ton of ownership. So count me in on Edmonton 1, but again, I would probably just start with McDavid and Draisaitl and kind of go from there. On the Calgary side, with the Backlund line taking the Edmonton top line, which has been about league average defensively, then you get into the better matchups at 5-on-5. For me, I would probably go to the Kadri line. It's just, Edmonton's penalty kill is not elite or anything, and they are taking their fair share of penalties, 3.4 times per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the 5th highest rate in the league. Over the course of the season, not nearly as bad, about league average. So it's just been getting, they've been taking more penalties as they've been drawing more penalties. Got to thank the referees for that. But the Calgary power play is just flat out bad. 6.3 goals per 60 so far this season. Like, that's off the top of my head, about 25% worse than league average. It's just for a top power play unit, it's just nothing that I'm really super concerned about in this particular matchup. So for me, I would want to go to the Calgary line that is playing well at 5-on-5. And for me, that is the Kadri line. Kadri, Farabee, Sharangovich, 13,500, 1.95 fantasy points per 1,000, 2.7% top two stack, 4.6% ownership. So a little bit of negative leverage, but not too bad for 13,500. Sharangovich over 2 shots per game over his last 15 games. That entire line's playing anywhere between like 17 and 20 minutes. Like Kadri at the high end will get close to 20 minutes. Farabee, Sharangovich, though, playing like 17, 18 minutes. That's good ice time. They're not going to get the tough matchups. I think they're perfectly fine as a filler here at 13,500. I'm not afraid of the Edmonton depth defensively. So while I do like the Edmonton side a lot better here, and I would start any stack with McDavid and Draisaitl, I don't mind Calgary 1 as a filler. So for me, it goes Edmonton 1 / Edmonton power play, and then Calgary 1. All right, next game. And boy, is this one an absolute dandy. San Jose Sharks are going into Vancouver. San Jose has a 2.8 total. The Vancouver Canucks have a 3.2 total, which is really, really funny when you consider the Canucks injuries and missing Quinn Hughes from the trade and all that. But it does look like Elias Pettersson is going to be back here tonight for Vancouver. I haven't seen an official lineup, so never mind. Pettersson, Sherwood, Evander Kane, Marco Rossi, Brock Besser, Jake DeBrusk. Okay. Vancouver's top line. I was looking at Pettersson and DeBrusk I was looking at Pettersson's numbers when they don't have Connor Garland. 46 shot attempts per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. That is horrific shot generation. He was reasonably productive before the injury. In the 10 games before he got injured, he had 9 points, averaging 2.5 shots per game. So, I guess there's something there. For me, I have a little bit of interest in Rossi, Besser, and DeBrusk. I'm not entirely sure what the top power play unit will be necessarily. I think they take off Connor Garland and put on Elias Pettersson and go with Rossi, Besser, DeBrusk, Pettersson. That would make that second line perfectly correlated on the power play. Now, they don't have much of a sample yet together, just 60 minutes, but their shot attempts per 60 is actually a little bit higher than the 46 that we just mentioned from Pettersson. And again, I think they'll be perfectly correlated on the power play. They're not that expensive. If you put Besser, Rossi, and DeBrusk together, that line is 13,700. So they're priced as a filler. Now they're going to come in. I think they're going to come in with a fair bit of ownership. The old line with Evander Kane was projected at 2x the ownership of their top two. But again, perfectly correlated against a Sharks team with a very bad penalty kill that takes a fair amount of penalties, with the Canucks drawing a lot of power plays. The Canucks over the last 5 weeks, 3.4 power play opportunities per game. It's the 4th highest rate in the league. Over the course of the season, they're tied for the 5th highest rate of power play opportunities per game. So a lot of power plays against a bad penalty kill. And that second line from Vancouver, I think, is going to be perfectly correlated. I kind of like Vancouver too here at 13,700. Again, I think they're going to come in a little bit over-owned, but as a filler stack with a 3.2 total at home against a bad Sharks team, I don't mind Vancouver too here. That's where I would go. Pettersson, with his injury history, I'm not running out to play him in his first game back at 6,200. So for me, it's Vancouver too. The question is what to do on the San Jose side, because I'm not worried about any of the matchups on the Vancouver side. San Jose, they moved Colin Graf off the top line in the last game and put William Eklund there. I don't think they've had a morning skate yet. They'll probably they are literally just hitting the ice as I'm talking right now. So we'll see what the lineup looks like. But, pretty good so far with Chernyshov and skating next to Celebrini, 65 shot attempts, 4.2 expected goals per 60 in their 4 games together. Now, obviously, that's not a big sample. It's nothing that I would draw any firm conclusions from. But, it's not like they had an easy road the final 4 games before the break. They had Calgary, Dallas, Seattle, Vegas. Like, okay, Seattle not good, but Calgary, Dallas, and Vegas, it's not really easy 5-on-5 matchups, and they were able to create pretty well. Celebrini, his last 20 games, he's over 3 shots per game with 29 points. He's skating 22 minutes a game. When Graf was there, he was skating 18 minutes a game. So again, we'll see what the lineup looks like. But especially if William Eklund jumps to the top line. So like if the top line is Eklund, Chernyshov, and Celebrini, it's only 17,800. And I think it's a pretty good 5-on-5 matchup. Vancouver penalty kill has been getting better lately. A lot of it is Thatcher Demko, and Thatcher Demko starting is the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous here. I do wish it was one of the backups and not Demko, but it is what it is. San Jose power play, they're still not scoring with John Klingberg. I will give them their props. Over the last 10 games, the underlying metrics have improved a lot. So while the goal scoring on the power play hasn't been there, the metrics have been better lately than they were earlier in the season with Klingberg. So maybe there's something to it. If they go back to Graf, Chernyshov, Celebrini, I think it's tough to stack just because he's the only guy on the line on the top power play, and you want to get some power play guys in here in this matchup. Just, the Sharks are drawing the most power plays per game in the league over the last 5 weeks, third most in the league over the course of the season. So even if the power play is not very good, they're just drawing so many power play opportunities. I think you want to get some guys from the power play unit in there. So if Eklund is on the top line, then I really do like San Jose 1. If he's not, then I would definitely play some sort of broken San Jose stack. Then I would play Celebrini, Toffoli, Eklund, like something like that. So I prefer the San Jose side here. For me, it's San Jose 1, especially if Eklund is there. But I really don't mind Vancouver 2. I do think that they're going to end up perfectly correlated. All right, last game. Colorado, 3.2 total. They're going to Vegas. Vegas has a 2.8 total. These guys are also just hitting the ice as I'm talking here. Scott Wedgwood is starting for the Avs, so we have that. I assume Colorado won their last game before the break with those new line combinations, Landeskog on the top line. They were on a 6-game winning streak before the break, so I don't imagine they're going to change up too much. Colorado top line of Nathan McKinnon, Martin Necas, Gabriel Landeskog, 21,400, 13.2% top 2 stack, 3.2% ownership. So nobody's playing them. Now, the one issue I have here is that Mark Stone is healthy for Vegas, and Mark Stone is a difference maker defensively for Vegas when he's in the lineup. So whether or not Jack Eichel is back here tonight, I haven't seen anything about that one way or the other. Whether or not Jack Eichel is back, it's a pretty bad 5-on-5 matchup for that Vegas top line. So, or for that Colorado top line, sorry. So, 40 minutes with Landeskog there, 63 shot attempts per 60, 3.8 expected goals per 60. Those are actually pretty good offensive numbers, but they were better with Lehkonen, especially over the first 6 or 8 weeks of the season. And it's a pretty bad 5-on-5 matchup, though. If you have to go up against a line of with Marner and Stone on it, it's just a bad 5-on-5 matchup. And Vegas doesn't take a lot of penalties. They're the least penalized team in the league over the last 5 weeks. Over the course of the season, Vegas, the second least penalized team in the league. And it's not like Colorado's power play's been great. So, I don't know, man. I think it's just a really tough matchup for Colorado in a single entry. At that price, I'll just go play Edmonton, maybe save some money, go play Boston, save a bit of money, go play Ottawa. certainly, like I said, I'd rather play the Oilers. I just think, considering how bad the 5-on-5 matchup is, it's another one of those things like Carolina, where if the power play was absolutely just smashing, that'd be one thing, but it's not. Like, the power play is the one weakness that the Avs have. They really rely on even strength scoring. And again, it's a really bad 5-on-5 matchup for Colorado 1. So I'm out on Colorado 1. I do have a bit of interest in Colorado 2, though. Like, they are going to miss that tough matchup against Mark Stone. And then once you get to those depth Vegas lines, they're not nearly as good defensively. And, you get Brock Nelson on the top power play in case the power play does get there. But, that Colorado second line, I was looking at Brock Nelson in his minutes without Gabriel Landeskog, 71 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60. Brock Nelson, 2.8 shots and 8 points in his last 10 games. They're a bit expensive at 14,600, but I think they're very playable just because they get a really, really good 5-on-5 matchup. And Vegas has been giving up some high danger opportunities this season. The defense isn't what it was last season. So I think for me, it's Colorado 2 over Colorado 1 in this matchup. On the Vegas side, like, I'm still looking for anything on the Vegas side. Like, I just saw that Carter Hart is going to be starting. So, at least we have that much. But as far as the Vegas line goes, I haven't seen anything confirmed. So, we'll definitely update in the Discord. It'll be 2 weeks now that Jack Eichel is out with an illness. Oh, just seeing now, Eichel is still out. Barbashev, Marner, Stone, Dorofeev, Hurdle, and Holtz. Sorry. So we do have that. Marner and Stone, pretty good together this season, but going up against Colorado 1, it will be a high-paced matchup. I think I would dip down to Hurdle, Holtz, and Dorofeev, though. Holtz and Hurdle, good offensive numbers together this season, bad defensive numbers. And it's a small sample. Holtz hasn't played a lot of games. So, but 56 shot attempts, 2.9 expected goals per 60 is not bad. You get Hurdle and Dorofeev on the top power play. Hurdle has 8 points in his last 10 games. So you do have that. They're priced at 13,800. So they're basically filler status. Pretty good point per dollar projection, considering 1.97 fantasy points per $1,000. I think that's solid enough. I do think both of Vegas' top 2 lines are in play. I would probably dip down to the Vegas second line, but I'm going to be honest. I think my favorite line in this game is Colorado 2. Vegas doesn't really draw a ton of power play opportunities. Colorado's penalty kill has been sliding a bit, but still really good, and they don't take many penalties either. This is a game where I'm focused on the 5-on-5 matchup, and I think that 5-on-5 matchup for the second line of Colorado is a good one. So it's both second lines for me in this game, but Colorado 2 is the line that I prefer. Lehkonen, Nichushkin, and Brock Nelson. Fave lines to stack besides Edmonton. I mean, I haven't made my lineup yet. I do like that Anaheim second line that we talked about earlier. The Robertson and Hintz line from Dallas, I think, is very playable. Ottawa's top line, very playable. The Jack Hughes line from New Jersey, the Bennett line from Florida, and both top lines in the Buffalo and Boston game, though I prefer the Buffalo side. Those are kind of the lines that I've been looking at least for main stacks here tonight. All right, let's get our goalies. Looks like Jake Ottinger is going to be starting for Dallas here tonight. He has the highest overall projection and the highest value. Makes a lot of sense at home against a Chicago team missing Nazar and Bedard. There's some real good shutout equity for Ottinger. So if you make your lineup and you're sitting there with 85, 86, 8,700 left, I think you can just slide in Ottinger and kind of be done with it. Now, we don't have a confirmed goalie for Washington yet. I imagine it's going to be Logan Thompson, but not for sure. But, Jersey's pretty good at shot generation, not always so good at goal generation. Logan Thompson, 7,800, I think is perfectly fine here tonight as well. Jesper Wallstedt starting for Minnesota. Now, we have Philip Gustafsson in the projections, but Wallstedt's not going to be very far off. He has a solid value. He has the 6th highest projection on the board here tonight. So of the expensive goalies, I think it's Ottinger, Thompson, and Wallstedt for me. But, there are some cheap goalies I think worth playing here. Like Connor Hellebuck is 7,300 at home against Minnesota. Like, Minnesota is a pretty good team. 7,300 for Connor Hellebuck at home against basically anybody not named Colorado is something that I'm fairly interested in. He does have a very good point per dollar value here tonight, so I like Hellebuck. Anton Forsberg has the 2nd highest projection and the 2nd highest value of any goalie here tonight facing Anaheim. I guess, the Ducks haven't been the offensive juggernaut lately, so I think Forsberg is playable. I will also mention Joseph Woll, 7,300 against Ottawa. It's just a shot volume thing. Ottawa can generate shots. Toronto gives up a lot of shots. The problem is like maybe Woll gives up like 4 goals on 34 shots or something. Then again, maybe he only gives up 1 goal on 34 shots. That's kind of the way it goes with goaltending. So the 3 cheap goalies I'm looking at are Hellebuck, Anton Forsberg, and Joseph Woll. Defenseman. Was Rasmus Dahlin out? Technically, the highest projected defenseman is Cale Makar, but he has a pretty bad value, as does Quinn Hughes. Those aren't guys that I'm really chasing here tonight. Evan Bouchard, certainly in that matchup against Calgary, I think he's in play at 6,800. I do like Jake Sanderson for Ottawa. He still gets a ton of minutes. A great power play matchup for him at 6,700. Rasmus Anderson is not going to carry a lot of ownership, maybe around 5%, but he has solid point per dollar value for a 6K plus defenseman at 6K. So I don't mind him tonight either. So the expensive defenseman, I think it's Bouchard, Sanderson, and Anderson. Just under 6K, Darren Radish, solid projection against Florida. He's been skating like 25 minutes a game over his last 5 games. So with that kind of ice time, in case Florida does bust out offensively, I think, Radish is certainly playable. John Carlson, assuming that he's in tonight at 5,100, also playable for Washington. Mackenzie Weegar, 5,700, I think is playable. But if I'm playing a defenseman between 5 and 6K, it's probably Darren Radish. It's once we get under 5K where things really get interesting, like Thomas Chabot for 4,100 has one of the highest point per dollar values for any defenseman. I think the highest point per dollar value of any defenseman over 4K here tonight. So Thomas Chabot. Justin Falk, like, listen, the guy's right around 2 shots and 2 blocks per game. With those kind of peripherals, like, it's hard to argue with a $4,500 price tag. Thomas Harley certainly is playable at his price in that matchup against Chicago. Noah Hannafin again for Vegas with no Shea Theodore, and Noah Hannafin at 4,300, very playable even against Colorado. Darnell Nurse at his price, 4,100, over 2 fantasy points per 1,000 projected. He's playable. Brant Clark, like, listen, I know he doesn't get a ton of ice time, but it's a really great matchup at home against Anaheim. It's a good matchup for him to rack up shots and blocks, so I don't mind Brant Clark. Under 4K, Bowen Byram, you got to say he's close to the top, getting top power play time for Buffalo. And, he should play 22, 23, 24 minutes. Philip Hronik leads the projections for all defensemen under 4K here tonight. He's been playing 24 to 25 minutes a game without Quinn Hughes, so that makes sense. If there's no Keandre Miller, Sean Walker makes a lot of sense for Carolina. His minutes have been down lately, but if there's no Slavin, if there's no Keandre Miller, I certainly don't mind Sean Walker here tonight at 3,600. Matthias Ekholm under 4K is in play. Like Matthias Samuelsson, he had been playing the most minutes of any Buffalo defenseman over the last 5 games as it was. Without Rasmus Dahlin, he might get even more, which is kind of wild. As long as Alexander Nikishin plays, if there's no Keandre Miller, Nikishin is fine. Hampus Lindholm has a solid projection for 3,400. He's all right. Matt Roy for Washington, I think he's very playable, especially if there's no Rasmus Sandin. Again, we'll have to see it warm up. Under 3K, Marcus Pettersson projects well for Vancouver, especially in that good home matchup against San Jose. Caden Korchak's been skating about 20 minutes a game for Vegas without Shea Theodore in the lineup. So Caden Korchak at 2,700, very playable. Jalen Chatfield, another Carolina defenseman, again without Slave and if there's no Keandre Miller, pretty much would seem that Chatfield would be a lock for over 20 minutes. Radko Gudas, I think, is playable at under 3K. Wyatt Kaiser for Chicago, not a huge fan of his in general, but if you need a Stoneman price guy that can put up a block bonus, I think he's the guy that can do it. And Jacob Bernard Docker, as long as he's in the lineup for Detroit, again, haven't seen a lot of news about their lineup, but if you need a mid-price guy, I think he's in play as well. All right, that'll wrap things up. That is the 12-game slate. Again, with the storm in the Northeast, there's going to be some last-minute changes, I imagine, to some teams. We're especially looking at teams like Boston and Washington and what have you. So be sure to stay locked under the Discord. If you do sign up for DFS, use a promo code PuckLuck. That is a promo code for this show for Josh and I. So certainly would appreciate your support if you do decide to join us. We will be back on Monday. I think we have a decent slate on Monday. So we will be back on Monday with a show. I know the contests aren't great tonight. It is what it is. Welcome to DFS in the middle of the season. Hat trick pick for tonight. Going to go kind of off the board. Go a little bit wild for our first game back here. I'm going with Alex Laferriere. Frostback, hope you didn't hear that. Sorry. But thanks again for tuning in. Certainly appreciate all your guys' support and all your patience for all the changes that we've had over the last few weeks. But yes, we will be back on Monday. Until then, good luck tonight, everybody.